Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Tonight we're back here with SCP Explained, and tonight, well, time for another round of putting stuff inside SCP-914. Yeah, time for another SCP Enhanced by the Clockworks. And today it's SCP-1471, aka MalO. I think actually someone recommended to me this, and I was like, wait, didn't I do that one? Oh well. So, yeah, I made sure to look back, and yep, haven't. So, anyway, let's see what happens when MalO gets put inside the Clockworks. So be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's check it out.
Dr. Gears was having another boring day at the SCP Foundation. And that was exactly how he liked it. He treated himself to a cup of decaf black coffee. No cream, no sugar, a simple plain donut, and an apple. The breakfast of champions, to him at least. His duties today were ones he'd overseen so many times before. Watching his ever-rotating legion of subordinates shove various items into SCP-914 the Clockworks, just to see what on earth would happen. This machine had the ability to transmute matter in a variety of fashions, depending on the input selection, whether rough, coarse, one-to-one, fine, or even very fine. They tested everything, from Dr. Gears' watch to a chimp, which, as we all know, resulted in the beloved hyper-intelligent chimp scientist, Dr. Bobo. There were in fact such extensive testing records for SCP-914 that Dr. Gears had started taking an uncharacteristic hands-off approach to testing, as long as the researchers working under him were reasonably sure that the results of their testing wouldn't result in a containment breach, a fundamental alteration of consensus reality, or some massive loss of life. They could just go ahead with whatever dumb little experiment their heart desired. This, however, would turn out to be a way longer leash than Dr. Gears ever should have given to the kind of weirdos who work at the SCP Foundation. There had been certain, let's say, incidents in the past that have proved members of the SCP Foundation aren't above using anomalies inappropriately for their own personal enjoyment.
What happened?
There was, of course, the incident with SCP-662, the Butler's Handbell, and the supernatural butler it summons, Mr. Deeds. During the early stages of testing, Dr. Mirth, under the guise of experimentation, made Mr. Deeds make him tea, wash his car, cut his hair, and even do his laundry. Dr. Mirth was given a stern talking to by the O5 Council for this abuse of power. Good job, O5 Council. It's not like you ever use anomalies for your own benefit. Let's move on. Nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah, less said about the old 5 Council, the better. I guess they didn't want anyone using SCP or Mr. Deeds to kill the old 5 Council. I mean, think about it. If they had unrestricted access and they pissed up them, yeah, that's just an accident and a little loss of life. Yeah, that's just asking for a disaster. Anyway, moving on.
Speaking of people working for the Foundation using anomalies inappropriately, who could forget the extremely uncomfortable incident involving SCP-137, a real toy? This anomaly has the ability to become a real-life version of any toy brought into its vicinity, from the Masters of the Universe to Barbie in her dream house. But one researcher was hiding a horrifying secret. He was a brony. And that's why he sneaked a Twilight Sparkle toy into the testing chamber so he could have a conversation with his favorite My Little Pony character, which all in attendance agreed just had incredibly rancid vibes through and through. And that brings us back to today. Dr. Gears deciding to let his subordinate researchers throw pretty much anything into the Clockworks as long as it was unlikely to cause physical harm. And leaving this metaphorical door open allowed people like Dr. Siegel to step through.
What'd he do?
You see, while Dr. Siegel was considered by most to be an incredibly diligent and hard-working junior researcher, he did have one vice in his downtime. He was a card-carrying furry. And we're not just talking about a guy who watched Disney's Zootopia a few too many times. He had his own fursona. A wolf, if you were curious. I personally wasn't. He attended cons for fellow furries semi-frequently, and even had his own expensive, custom, high-end fursuit. As such, there was one SCP he found particularly interesting. SCP-1471, also known as MalO version 1.0.0, an anomalous mobile app with some extremely strange properties. If you access it on an app store of your choice, you'll encounter an image of a strange, skull-headed canine creature, with the following iconic description.
Okay.
MalO, version 1.0.0, free. Reviews, 0. Description. Never settle for those awkward feelings of being alone ever again. MalO is an exciting and interactive experience that will keep you engaged and intrigued. The anxiety of social situations can be nerve-wracking, but after just a few hours of MalO, you will soon forget all about those painful emotions of disappointment. Be part of the new craze that is so quickly becoming the next social substitute. Remember, the more you participate, the more MalO will engage you. Your experience is completely up to you. Absolutely no ads. Enjoy. Dr. Siegel was certainly eager to forget all his painful emotions of disappointment and embrace the new social substitute. But he'd read all the documents and seen all the pictures on the file. Those who download the MalO app will be texted a series of photos, becoming closer to home over time, both literally and figuratively, which show the strange creature known as MalO getting closer and closer. For some, this would be a complete nightmare. For those inclined in the direction of Dr. Siegel, it would be a dream come true. There was only one issue. They were just pictures. But Dr. Siegel didn't get it.
Are we sure? I'm not too sure what the end results are usually with the MalO encounters. Like, I'm gonna have to look those up after I'm done. I'm kind of curious now. I don't remember exactly what happens, but I don't know. It doesn't seem... I mean, could be harmless, but hard to say. So, I'll look it up later, but let's just keep going.
The job at the SCP Foundation by having a lack of intelligence. He'd very quickly figured out a potential solution to the digital barrier between him and his canine crush. He'd buy a burner phone, download the MalO app onto it, and put the resulting infected device directly into the clockworks. It was one of the best ideas he'd ever had, in his own humble opinion. But of course, it would all be about selecting the right setting. On rough, the most likely result would be the phone itself just being transformed into a pile of broken glass, metal, and a variety of conflict minerals
probably
reduced
destroying
to
the app
dust.
too.
On course, the result would likely be the metal chassis of the phone, the front glass panel, and a neatly arranged interior gutted from within. On one-to-one, considering he'd bought a slightly older, cheaper model of Samsung's smartphone, he'd probably get the MalO app on an iPhone. And on fine, perhaps the best he could hope for was getting MalO version 2.0.0, which may have some minor improvement, like the pictures appearing twice as fast as they would with the normal app experience. Dr. Siegel knew that the only other option that could potentially bring MalO into the real world was the highly unpredictable Very Fine option, which would either produce the desired result or cause something utterly horrifying to happen. But at the end of the day, Dr. Siegel thought to himself, isn't anything worth having also worth incurring a little risk? Who dares wins, after all, right? He downloaded the fateful app and made his way into the testing area for SCP-914.
This ain't gonna end well.
Slot, so it was all official, but he still felt his heart racing as he put the infected phone into the input chamber. He set the control panel to Very Fine, exactly as planned, and activated the machine. Cogs twisted and churned, engines rumbled and sputtered, pipes wriggled.
He is so going to get fired after this.
Something was going on here. When the process was complete and the output chamber opened with a billowing carpet of steam, Dr. Siegel could barely contain his excitement. He hoped that MalO would come strolling out of the smoke like Darth Vader in Star Wars: A New Hope. So you can only imagine his extreme disappointment when the chamber was completely empty. It didn't make sense. He thought everything through. How could the result possibly be so anticlimactic? This had gone from one of the most exciting days of his life to the most depressing. Dr. Siegel sighed and decided to call it quits, heading out of the test chamber, having no idea what he'd just unleashed onto the Foundation. Across the site...
Oh boy, this ain't gonna end well. Yeah, honestly, if I was Gears and was in charge of this guy, I would be like, look, if there's anything electronic, let me check and then make sure, like, you tell me exactly what you're putting in, otherwise no go. If you're just going to tell me something else, I would have been like, what's your plan? I mean, other than that, you're kind of on your own. Just saying. Makes things stuff like this not going to happen anymore. Alright, time for MalO to apparently go wild on the SCP Foundation, so let's check it out.
Dr. Alto Clef, one of the Foundation's most infamous researchers, was polishing his favorite shotgun in his office. He was whistling a cheerful tune to himself, just loving life, when he heard some strange rustling by the door. He turned around on his swivel chair just to make sure it wasn't Dr. Bright putting another bucket of battery acid on top of his door as a, quote, fun, harmless prank. Instead, he was shocked to see MalO, an actual, physical MalO, standing in his doorway, grinning. For a moment, Clef was too shocked to even react. This didn't make any kind of sense, but when MalO gave him a cheeky wink, he immediately loaded his shotgun and fired, blowing away a chunk of his own doorway. But sadly for him, by that time, MalO had already darted away, intent on causing mischief elsewhere, its favorite pastime. Dr. Clef was still wondering whether that rascal Dr. Bright was somehow behind this fiasco. But he was not, because he was actually about to become MalO's next victim in its ruthless reign of mild to moderate inconvenience. Dr. Bright was swanning around the break room with his favorite morning snack, a coffee with extra cream and a Danish from his favorite bakery in town. He was looking forward to enjoying these two simple pleasures in his otherwise incredibly stressful life, but little did the poor doctor know, tragedy was about to strike.
Let me guess, knock the Danish out of his hand?
Be the same. Just as the immortal doctor was about to disembark from the room, MalO appeared right in front of him, giving him the mild shock of his life. It was such a surprising occurrence, in fact, that he momentarily lost his grip on his coffee mug and his Danish, causing both to tumble to the ground. The mug shattered and the Danish splattered. By the time Dr. Bright looked up, MalO was already gone. Just like his
Damn, that is one fast one.
Dr. Bright fell to his knees and screamed, "Why?" up to an indifferent break room ceiling. But MalO was just getting started.
Oh boy,
Dr. King Pathos Crow was on his way from his kennel. We mean his private quarters to the soul extractor when MalO suddenly manifested in front of him. This resulted in a brief barking match between the two for dominance over that particular hallway, which ended in MalO demanifesting to bother someone else, which technically made Dr. Crow the winner, though Crow himself resented ever being forced to act like a mere mutt. How, he began to wonder, had MalO escaped its app and begun to harass the real world? This would warrant further investigation. MalO continued its rampage of irritation across the site, intended to leave no stone of frustration unturned. And it wasn't just the Foundation staff it intended to freak out. It was just as eager to go and bother its fellow anomalies now that it had access to the meat space. Yes, that is a real term. We're not just being weird and gross. We promise. Over in the cell of SCP-173, the sculpture, 3 members of D-Class personnel were cleaning up the homicidal creature's blood and poop. They were engaged in the standard procedure. One of them mopped, while the other 2 kept a close eye on SCP-173 to keep it frozen in place. That's when MalO popped into the cell behind them for a split second before disappearing, scaring the living hell out of all 3 of them. Though the fright was, of course, secondary to the fact that the second they looked away, SCP-173 snapped all 3 of their necks. Oops. May have gone a little too far on that one, MalO? But this newly embodied burdensome beast was just getting started, friends. No anomaly was safe from its new antics. Next, it appeared in front of SCP-682's acid tank and made rude faces at the hateful creature from the other side of the glass. This only served to sour the creature's already utterly horrific mood. It thrashed around in the chamber, attempting to get out and perform an act of great violence. But by that time, MalO was already long gone, and SCP-682 was left grumbling in immense frustration. SCP-049, the Plague Doctor, was having another very boring day. He'd been denied his animal cadaver test subjects for several days as a disciplinary measure after the latest incident, and as such, he was finding other ways to pass the time. Today, he was meticulously removing each piece of medical equipment, polishing them, and putting them in a neat line on his desk in his containment chamber.
Oh yeah, Smile's gonna mess up
forceps, speculums, bone saws, all wonderful, shiny, and pristine. The Plague Doctor found it to be an incredibly calming activity, so, of course, MalO couldn't just let him be. The cantankerous canine, driven mad by the power of suddenly being able to interact with the world physically, manifested in the middle of the containment chamber and used its tail to knock all of the meticulously arranged medical equipment onto the ground with a thunderous clatter. The Plague Doctor, devastated, lifted both of his hands to his beak and yelled, Sacre bleu! In horror. In that same instant, MalO once again disappeared, leaving the tragic doctor to start from scratch. It was a serious setback on an otherwise lovely day. Curse you, strange dog creature, he thought to himself while bending over to pick up the pieces. Curse you and your entire bloodline. A group of hardcore Mobile Task Force members was engaged in the comically manly activity of playing poker while smoking in the barracks. And before you judge them for that, remember that if your job was as stressful as being a member of a Mobile Task Force, you'd probably smoke too. But their job was about to get a little more stressful when MalO suddenly materialized and gave the poker table a sharp kick, sending the towers of poker chips and decks of cards all over the place, before disappearing without a trace yet again. It completely ruined their game. One of the more junior members asked, "Should we have done something about that?" A more senior operative shook his head and said, "We'll do something when we get the official call from up top. Until then, let's reshuffle the deck." In the Site-19 cafeteria, Dr. Agatha Wrights was preparing to eat a delicious salad that she'd been waiting all day to enjoy. As we've often established, working at the SCP Foundation can be an immensely stressful job, so you need to take the small joys where you can get them. For Dr. Wrights, this delicious premium salad that she'd bought from Harris Teeter earlier in that day was indeed a joy. She even got a fancy vinaigrette dressing for the occasion. Before she took the first bite, she noticed SCP-073 Kane approaching. Dr. Wright smiled and gave him a polite nod. Kane waved back. That, our dear viewers, is
Let me guess, tripped Kane
MalO
the
suddenly
salad?
manifested in front of Kane, propping out one of its canid legs right in front of where the hapless anomaly was walking. By the time Kane began to trip and fall over, MalO had already vanished. But it was too late. Kane kept falling forward until one of his metal hands landed right into the bowl that contained Dr. Wrights' salad. Due to his anomalous abilities, the salad immediately withered away into nasty, dead nothingness. Dr. Wrights began to cry as Kane, who felt profoundly guilty, tried his best to apologize. Truly, nobody in Site-19 was safe. MalO popped up behind Iris and ruined all of her photos. MalO popped up behind the immortal Hitler clone in his cell and gave him a good kick in the rear. MalO even popped up right behind SCP-343, also known as God, who smugly replied, "I knew you were going to do that, my son." Needless to say, it had been one hell of a day. Dr. Siegel, completely ignorant to the chaos his actions had caused around the site, had cried in the bathroom for 40 minutes out of sheer disappointment. He'd barely been able to focus on the rest of his duties for the day on account of being severely bummed out. This was a day he'd been looking forward to for so long, and it all had been for nothing. That evening, he was driving home on the highway, listening to sad songs on the radio, thinking about the fact he'd probably just crack open a beer and get some sleep when he got home. He sighed again and looked up to adjust his rearview mirror when he saw a skeletal face with huge white eyes staring at him in the reflection. A quick, almost reflexive turn revealed a huge black figure with a canine skull for a face was indeed just sitting in his back seat, watching him. It was so shocking that he immediately veered off the road and crashed his car into the concrete divider in the middle of the road, breaking his nose and collarbone in the process. Really a perfect cherry on top for this kind of day. Dr. Siegel was sitting in the hospital not long after that, with a cast around his upper body. This was also where he received a bouquet of flowers from Dr. Gears with an attached note saying he was put on 3-month disciplinary leave for the irresponsible use of SCP-914.
There you go.
Dr. Siegel looked up and saw that MalO was peering around the corner at him with its dead white eyes, its fang-lined maw twisted into a permanent, ominous grin. At this point, Dr. Siegel realized that being chased around constantly by a demonic skull-faced anomaly in real life wasn't nearly as whimsical as he expected it would be. In hindsight, that probably should have been obvious, shouldn't it? Though, please, let us know if you'd like MalO to stalk you in real life in the comments below, you bunch of weirdos. Now go check out SCP.
I'm good, thank you. Like, really? Like, dude, have you ever thought, like, hey, what do people say about her? Like, really? You know they're not gonna change, right? I mean, dude, you had that coming. Especially with that disciplinary action. You had it coming. Ugh. Please don't do this anymore. Anyway, so there was MalO's reign of terror, or in this case, reign of annoyance. So, until next time, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Adios.